South East Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
In recent months, the lack of supply of property in Ireland has received much media attention. But from a local perspective, how is the property market in County Wexford performing at present? Colum Murphy from Kehoe Associates joins me in the studio now to tell us more. Colum, it's been 12 months since you last joined me on Business Matters, and over that period we have seen Kehoe Associates add to their team. This is surely a positive sign for the property market here in County Wexford.
Yes, a positive sign, and certainly an expression of confidence in the market going forward. We recruited Pauline O'Sullivan there from Kilmuckridge, previously of DNG O'Sullivan in Gorey. So Pauline has joined the team, and to be fair, she's really hit the ground running. So very happy with that, and it's certainly a sign of our confidence in the market going forward.
And Colum, the reason I've asked you to join me on this morning's show is to take the temperature on the local property market. So how has 2017 been to date?
It's been busy, Karl. To be honest, really since we opened our doors 1st of January this year, it's been full belt across all the sectors really. Residentially particularly, you'll see that I suppose the key criteria in judging the residential property market, property values, how long properties are taking to sell, and number of properties coming to the market. And in those three areas, certainly the arrows are pointing upwards. So if you look at the property values, they've increased. Properties are selling quicker, and across the county, more properties are coming onto the market. That may be a contradiction now against the supply issue, and there is a supply issue within the urban areas, but generally there are more properties on the market.
And Colum, how much of an issue is supply?
Supply is, I would say it's a very big issue, particularly in the towns. So if you look at townhouses and the sale of townhouses in the four towns of County Wexford, there is a lack of supply. But all of these, the vast majority of these sales are coming from second-hand residential. There are very few new homes under construction, and that is where our supply issue is really. So very few new homes, but I feel that is being addressed across the planning permission indicators. If you look at the planning permission numbers, they're up significantly. Nationally, this quarter, planning permission grants are up 41% when you compare it to the same quarter last year. So that's a huge increase.
But are you finding that developers are purchasing the sites, they are applying for planning permission and then sitting on those sites for any particular reason?
I don't see them sitting on the sites as such. There are some sites that have been granted planning permission previously, and those plans are being renewed and just altered to match the 2017, 2018 house types and the expectation of a buyer. So you have changes on that front, but there are also new sites coming to the market and applications into County Council with a view to getting sites prepared. It's now moving into the next sector of recovery, where the property values now are at a level where a builder warrants building them, and it makes sense, and he can make a few quid along the way.
But with the shortage of social housing across the county, could we see developers sell off entire residential developments to housing bodies? It's
likely. It's happened in the past. Wexford County Council are very active on the ground, I think in the past they've gone in and they purchased. I think in New Ross actually they purchased a housing estate of about 35 residential units directly from the developer. So they've done it in the past. And it's certainly one way of meeting the needs of the housing list.
And Colum, just on the topic of social housing, talk to us about this new repair and leasing scheme which has been administered by Wexford County Council.
It's relating to properties that are vacant and in disrepair around County Wexford. So, and I know this is on the basis of if you have a property owner that for one reason or another doesn't want to offload and sell their property, it's another option. In many ways I might be talking myself out of a potential job here by getting to sell the property, but nonetheless it's very interesting to point out, and it also I hope will do something to alleviate the number of people on the housing list. So if you have a vacant property in County Wexford and it's in disrepair, Wexford County Council will offer you an interest-free loan to repair the property, assuming that the property is approved by them, and then they will take a lease on the property then. So and that can be a lease for anything between 5 to 10 years. So it might just suit if you had a 3-bedroom cottage in disrepair, and if there's a need for housing in that location, Wexford County Council lend you the money, interest-free loan to repair the property, and then that goes back then to take some people off the housing list for Wexford County Council and the housing bodies.
I'm hearing that people in full-time employment are now starting to present themselves at Wexford County Council as homeless because they can't afford to rent property across the county. How much of a problem is this, Colum?
Carl, I haven't heard that, but if that is the case, it certainly is a problem. But I just think you have to look at the overall market and say, well, how is this happening? If you have a number of houses coming to the market and a strong or a high percentage of those sellers are landlords that are disillusioned and they're getting out of the rental sector. So if you have that happening, and on the other side of it, then if you look at the profile of the buyers, and the vast majority of the buyers are buying those properties as owner occupiers, that's leading to one thing: that's the reduction in the number of houses within the rental sector, the number of houses available to be rented on the private rental sector market. So once that continues, there's only one way with rents, I'm afraid. So if I look at in the first 7 months of 2017, there were 141 properties purchased in County Wexford by non-owner occupiers or investors. So 141 houses in the county bought by investors. When you compare that to the first 7 months of last year, that's down 22%. So when you have investors who are slow to purchase and landlords selling their properties, the trend of increases in residential rents, unfortunately, is set to continue.
Now, there are 129 properties listed on Airbnb across County Wexford. How much of a disruption is that having on our local property market?
The one impact I would see it having is on the residential units available to rent in the market. So if you have a block of flats or apartments, we'd say there's one building I sold recently. There was seven 2-bed apartments or flats in a town centre. Kehoe and Associates sold that building recently. Now that's being sold to a man who's going to do Airbnb in the unit. So that takes 7 residential units out of the private rental sector. And when you dig a little bit deeper into that, you're looking at, 1 and 2 bed units that would be available at maybe €450-500 per month. So they're really taking that supply away from the low the rental market, which perhaps, there's no doubt is detrimental, and perhaps that's leading on to where you were going with the people presenting themselves as homeless, unfortunately.
And as we look out over the next 12 months from a residential perspective across the county, what do you estimate that the value of property will increase by over that period?
Okay, yeah, good question, Karl. And we're down to the crystal ball again, I'm afraid. But let's just look at in the last 18 months and then throw that forward. In the first 6 months of 2017, in those 6 months, property prices increased by more than all of the 12 months of 2016. So you can see a noticeable acceleration there, and that's driven really by the value of the urban properties, because you can see them coming on the market and selling quicker and active bidding for them. Moving forward, so the last 12 months then, 12 months to the end of July, the figure is 14%. That's an increase in County Wexford of 14%. I think the 14% it needed to happen to get back to a realistic value compared to the cost of construction. My own belief is that will be somewhere between 7 and 10% for the next 12 months.
Now, if you've just tuned in, I'm speaking to Colum Murphy from Kehoe and Associates. Colum, I'd like to turn our attention next to retail properties. Is there a strong demand for retail units across the county? There is.
Like anything, it's down to location really, but there is, in some areas, there is a strong demand for retail units. And for those who know the county well, you can see that in the busier portions of Wexford's main street, and in Gorey as well. There's good availability in Enniscorthy and New Ross at the moment, and figures recently showing the number of vacant retail units will reflect that, with Gorey being the lowest and Wexford being the second lowest. So there is in general, there is demand from retailers where they will see an opportunity to open a unit and run a successful business out of it.
And are there many large retailers expressing an interest in locating here?
Yes, there are. There are some large retailers, and we at Kehoe and Associates are dealing with several large retailers that really have only come on the scene in the last 6 months, that wouldn't have shown an appetite previously. So certainly that augurs well going forward, and hopefully we can slot those into various positions in town.
And from a county perspective, where are the blockages in the system from a retail perspective?
The blockages in the system, probably just the way that the older buildings are structured. A lot of retailers are looking for a certain type of unit, be it, let's say, 1,500 square feet, that's about 150 square metres, or 2,000 square feet in a rectangular shoebox shape with good frontage and plenty of ceiling height. And that's all very well if you're in, Dundrum or in Blanchardstown Centre or wherever. But in Wexford, you've got different elevations and steps up and steps down, and it's not easy to find that exact unit. So certainly there is, but that can be remodeled on a piece by piece basis. But it's not something you can change wholesale. The town and that's the streetscape. That's the way we have it. So there is a bit of a challenge around those property solutions at the moment. Really, you have some retailers looking for larger units and unable to locate them in the town centre.
And what are we doing to address this problem?
I'm dealing with a number of property developers who are looking at expanding existing units and construct newer units. So we certainly are working hand in hand with those developers to provide those property solutions. But that's not something that's done on a local government level or anything.
You mentioned Dundrum Town Centre. Dundrum is on one side of us, 90-minute drive away. There's also talk now that there's going to be a €350 million development go into the middle of Waterford City. So on either side of us, we're going to have huge developments. How is that going to impact our local retailers if, for instance, that Waterford development goes ahead?
Certainly, I don't see it. I don't see it as a positive. I don't mean that in any negative connotation towards Waterford. The best of luck to them and let them on and do what they can do. But I think there's a timing issue there as well. We need to move ahead and push ahead within Wexford and make sure that what we're offering as retailers is sustainable and competitive. I look at, I've had conversations, in recent years when I think back with retailers in Wicklow Town, and Wicklow Town was put under serious pressure in the immediate aftermath of the opening of Dundrum Town Centre, because really you can hop in the car in Wicklow and you're in Dundrum in 30 or 40 minutes, so we have to keep one eye on that for sure. But Wexford is a very strong retailing town, and you can see counter to that as well. If you look at Gorey, you would have thought that Gorey would be under pressure because it's closer to Dublin again, but in fact Gorey is thriving. So there's an opportunity in that. Some people think maybe if a given town is going to be bypassed, and this has been a theory right across the country for years, if a town was going to be bypassed, it was going to be hurt commercially or left to one side, but in fact the opposite has happened. So, but I do think we need to be cognizant of the fact that this is happening or is likely to happen in Waterford, so we need to drive on and make sure our offering remains competitive.
Preparation has commenced by Wexford County Council for the 2020 County Development Plan, and in that regard, Colum, do you think that there's a need for more land to be rezoned for retail developments across County Wexford?
There's plenty of land available at the zoned town centre in the different locations, and that's fine. The retail park zoning is another one, and that's okay. Maybe there are constraints around that at the moment. However, I do see I do see both sides of it. I see the market looking for more retail park zoned land. At the same time, I see the job that the planners have to maintain the town centre, and I think that's very important. So if you look at it, there are a number of vacant retail park zoned sites, and if they're unused and untaken up, it's very difficult for the council to come along and to rezone larger tracts of land. And the last thing we want is to end up with some form of a donut type scenario whereby, if you take Limerick City for example, where you have a number of retail parks out on the edges of the city, and then they were struggling to fill the retail units inside. So I have to be very careful. It's a very delicate balancing act, and certainly I don't envy the planners in that regard.
And what would your assessment be of the industrial property market across the county?
I think the supply on the industrial side is fine. I don't see any major issues around that. Maybe in terms of the quality of the unit might be something I could touch on. But there are plenty of vacant industrial units available. So you've reasonably good supply there. There was a larger overhang when the market crashed in 2008, but slowly but surely a good bit of that overhang has been eaten into. But when you have, take for example, with a client recently, and they're over from the UK looking for a unit 20,000 square feet in industrial, but they're looking for, so they're looking for they have exact criteria in terms of what they're looking for, in terms of delivery, loading bay, level dockers, eaves height. They're looking for a specific type of property that's going to tick every box for them, and that unfortunately isn't available in most of the cases, because you're dealing with probably in some cases 1970s, early 1980s industrial style buildings that between one reason or another, relocation of manufacturing or whatever, that are vacant and available to let, but that's reflected in the prices as well. The industrial price per square foot, if you take an industrial unit that could be rented at €2 or €3 per square foot, I mean, it just does not pay to construct that unit with the view surely to renting it out. So that's why that market has been met with industrial units that were coming from a previous use.
And finally, Wexford is an unusual county when it comes to agricultural land. As the further north of the county we go, the higher the value rises. But what is the current value of an acre of land across the county today? And is the uncertainty surrounding Brexit impacting on the demand for agricultural land?
Yes, it is an unusual county in terms of the various different, the quality of land as well in the different locations. But I would say on average, you're looking at agricultural land values around €8,000 per acre. It's a very specific type of market. So if you have a farm of land and you're looking to sell it, it really very much depends. If it's a large enough piece of land, if you have 100 acres or 200 acres, it's enough to bring in a farmer from a distance as a standalone farming unit. But if you have a unit that's 50 or 60 acres, it may not be large enough. And if none of the immediate farmers around your holding have an interest in it, well, that certainly limits the market. So you're very much dependable with the quality of the farmer in your immediate location, and whether or not they're in expansion mode, or whether or not the next generation is coming along to drive forward that expansion mode. On the Brexit side, yeah, I'd see a little bit of holding back there. Look, there's no good news in Brexit really. If 40% of all the exports in the agri sector going directly to the UK, so with that, there was only going to be a downside. And certainly, when you're in sales, you're looking for the positive and the opportunity and everything. But I see that as a major downside. Now, I believe that by the end of this year, when the figures are done for 2017, you'll find a reduction in the price per acre in County Wexford compared to 2016. But even one thing I did notice in my research for the planning grants, the grant of plannings nationally across the board, there's been a noticeable reduction in the number of new agricultural buildings. That's down significantly from Q2 last year. So maybe that's a sign. And yes, I would see there's quite a bit of agricultural land available on the market. So I see a little bit of a cooling. But then not all sectors of farming are going well at the moment. I'd say farming sector has its challenges. Maybe outside of the milk end of things, that seems to be going well enough, but the others certainly they have their pressures.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.